My name is Vladimir Blagoderov, and I won't be talking about science. I will be talking about some other bullshit. What I work and what I do. I am principal curator in National Museum of Scotland. I'm responsible for invertebrates. It's all animals without spines. Jellyfish, worms, mollusks, and of course insects. And you know all that insects constitute 2/3 of all species on Earth. So it's a lot to be dealt with. I always liked insects, but I never thought I would be doing what I do now. Because when I was in university, I dreamt to be a developmental biologist. It's amazing how, from a single cell, you can develop different tissues, complex structure, and different organisms. It's fascinating, but when it came for choosing my specialty on third year in university, I couldn't bring myself to do that. The professor was so boring. I literally fell asleep during the interview. I couldn't do that. Just imagine another 3 years listening to her. So I had to fall back to my love, previous love, and that's what I was doing since then. So I have a theory. So this picture, that every young entomologist wants to study either beetles or butterflies. There are no other types. So, for example, Darwin, all his life he was collecting beetles, while Alfred Wallace always preferred butterflies. So later, maybe they started specializing, and that's what happened to me. So I wanted to study beetles. But when I start my work in Paleontological Institute in Moscow, they said, you know what? We already have 3 coleopterists. We don't need a 4th one. So if you want, you can study flies. So I did, and never regretted that. So by profession, I'm an entomologist. I'm also a paleontologist, but more specifically, I am a taxonomist. So when it comes to the oldest profession on Earth, it's not journalism. And it's not what probably you're thinking about. No. So the first job of human was to name and organize the world around them, all the objects, including the animals and plants. And that was taxonomists are doing since then. They discover, describe, and classify all species on Earth. That's quite an interesting job. Well, for me, maybe it's dull. I don't know. I like it. The best place to do that is in a museum, because it's a great library of life science, and we have in National Museum of Scotland, over its more than 200 years history, amassed reasonably large collection of natural science specimens, about 10 million, about 85% of all the museum objects. 6 million of them are invertebrates. Half of the museum collection is those worms. You will never see them in Chambers Street because they're in West Grantham in museum collection facilities. Lots of compactors and rooms, and lots of boxes in there. So the job of natural history curator is quite different from the curator of art or curator in history. So not only we have to preserve those specimens in perpetuity, more importantly, we have to make sure that those specimens are being used in science in order to understand the life, its origin, evolution of species, and so on. So very often it means the specimen has to be dissected, analyzed, sometimes destroyed, for example, through extracted DNA and so on. So, job of curator is in natural science a contradiction in terms. It's a very fine balance between preservation and destruction. So, yeah, it's a little bit dodgy in this way. Well, I can talk more about the actual job of curator and different aspects of it, but I would like to turn to one of the most redeeming features of it. Not only we can satisfy our obsessive compulsive disorder by organizing specimens in boxes and moving them around, but we also can enhance the collection through the field work, and that's what I do. That's what I like the most about it. So when I was in Russia, I've done lots of work in Siberia, Yakutia, and Far East, and this is the most amazing feeling when you know that the closest human being to you is 100 miles away. You feel very, very safe. So this work, field work, takes us in a very amazing places sometimes. So National Museum of Scotland collection is very strong in British and particularly Scottish specimens. So I'm trying to bring more foreign stuff in there. So last December I was in South Africa, and we found some species that haven't been seen for 50 years, and some that are known only by one specimen before. So this is a nature valley in Sisikano Forest, the largest enclave of Afro-montane forest in entire southern Africa. And this is very young, so warm lions, so their larvae live, make traps in sand, and when other insects crawl along the side of this hole, they actually throw sand granules into those ants or other parts in order then not to fall in and then consumed. So very vicious animals, although they don't look at it. So my very dodgy presentation now may be excused by the fact that I'm just returned from today I returned from Dominican Republic, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. Dominican Republic is one of the largest and one of the most densely populated islands. So with a huge agricultural and mining industries, so preservation of natural ecosystem is very important for sustainable development there. But more interesting for me is that it's also known, very famous for the Dominican amber. So it's the largest locality, largest of amber, probably except the Baltic amber that we know. It's very clear, contains a lot of inclusions, and it gives us a unique window into the tropical ecosystem as it was 20 million years ago. So it would be absolutely amazing to compare fauna of Miocene, Upper Miocene, and recent fauna, insects. But when I started to prepare my trip to the Dominican Republic, I suddenly realized that it's not, we almost don't know anything about recent flies in the Dominican Republic. So we know, for example, for fungus gnats, the group that I studied in particular, we know about 22 genera from Dominican amber, but only 2 species, undescribed species and unnamed species, unidentified. recorded in recent fauna. That is absolutely amazing. That it never happens anywhere else, because we usually know recent fauna better than the fossil one. So, but I suppose when people go to the Dominican Republic, they expect tropical paradise, palms, beaches, merengue and mulattoes, but not insects. So, which is good for me. Whatever I collect there will be new for science, and I wasn't wrong. So the very first day, when I went to one of our nature scientific reserve, I found these wonderful flies. This is Elygestorina. Has its very long proboscis and very prominent hind legs. Relatively small genus of tropical flies distributed around the world. And until recently, about 20 years ago, we knew only probably 10 species. And now we have more than a dozen genera, about 60 species. And it turned out that this group is very ancient. So the oldest representative of Elygestorinids, known from the Lebanese amber, the first amber that contains numerous insect inclusions, which dates about 120 million years. So it has a very long history, and I suspect that if we study that carefully, that it turned out to be one of the mega diverse groups with hundreds and hundreds of species around the world. So just in a few days, in a very limited area, I found 3 different species of those flies, and they're all new, because there are not that many described. So, but apart from for my particular satisfaction and obsession with insects, why do we have to study them? That's a very interesting question, because first of all, I think in order to understand how the growing humankind is going to survive on Earth without destroying the ecosystem, we have to know how the ecosystem works, how the biosphere works. We have to know what lives on Earth, and we have to know what each species, what role each species hold in the ecosystem. I would argue that there are 3 main groups that makes the present world. It's flowering plants, theropods, mammals, birds, reptiles, and so on, and insects. If you remove one of them, the whole biosphere collapses. And a very good example is observed in Armando Bermudez National Park. I'm sorry for that, which is my phone. It doesn't focus. But if you see, you see, it's amazing landscape. Wonderful pine forest in the hills and the valley, where every tourist stops when they go up to the Pico do Arte, the highest mountain in Caribbean. So they stop there for a night, having a party and doing that thing. And usually they bring mules with them, because tourists are lazy, carry all this stuff in there. And frankly, carrying up 300 meters is a little bit excessive. So those black dots over there, you know what it is? It's a mule dung. The whole valley is covered by shame. And I was amazed, because usually dung, particularly such a rich dung as horse or mule dung, it disappears and being consumed in a matter of days and sometimes hours. But then it all became clear that there are no big mammals on Hispaniola. The largest mammal is a rodent, big like that. Which means there is no coprophagous insects. So when you bring mules, when you start the cattle industry, you have to be very, very careful. Otherwise, you end up with a barren land covered by shade. So unlike cattle industry, insects do not contribute too much into the climate change, but they are very, very good indicators of that. So changes in temperature, precipitation will be reflected in the changes of area of distribution, of flying times, and that's exactly where museum collections and our collection is coming from, because it contains record from for the last 300 years, which we can compare with the current distribution. A very good example is the northern Argus brown butterfly, which moves approximately 40 miles north every 5 years with the climate change. And it used to be found on Arctic seed. Now it's only you only can find them in Mongols because it's colder there. So, and if trend continues, it will disappear from nature trials. So if ecology and paleontology teaches us anything, is that the more diverse a system is, the more stable it is, the more resilient it is to external disturbance, and the faster it will recover from any disruption. That's why it's so important to preserve biodiversity, and that's why it also, I think, a very good lesson for society. Okay, that's all. Now, this is all.
Has anyone got any questions?
Yeah, ask any question.